Stephen, yeah. That should be us now.
Welcome members to the 41st meeting of the Committee for Finance in the 22-27 mandate, and advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. And I could advise our members and those in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode and all devices are muted. They can connect to Assembly Wi-Fi. Password details are available on the gallery rules, and it's not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meeting. So agenda item 1, apologies. Members' apologies have been received from the chairperson, Matthew O'Toole, and Owen Tennyson. Any other apologies?
No, not so far, Chair. As I say, Philip Brett is likely to be late,
Yep.
and we didn't get any from Dirty, so I'm expecting her to.
Okay, thank you. And Jerry Carroll and Gemma Dolan are joining us on Zoom. Agenda item 2, declaration of interest. All members are obliged to declare any relevant financial or other interest at each committee meeting as applicable. Have any members any relevant interest to declare?
Just through the chair, apologies for last week because I was only when I reading through the papers, I actually recognised a couple of the names that were in the papers in the TPs. So my bad admin, but I apologise for that. But no declaration of interest for this one.
Yes, thank you. Chairperson's business. Item 3.1, the Lay Observer Annual Report, April 2023 to March 2024, and Legal Services Oversight Commissioner. During last week's meeting, the committee noted the Lay Observer's Annual Report for 23-24, and members asked about the secondary legislation required to enact all of the Legal Service Oversight Commissioner powers. This legislation flows from the Legal Complaints and Regulation Bill, and the 4 required SRs should be coming to this committee shortly, as they are due to come into operation in September 2025. So 4 SRs coming before September 2025, so it's a good number, so look forward to that. We'll seek members' agreement to note this information and request a confirmed timescale for the SRs and schedule an oral briefing on these from the Department of Finance.
Thank you. Right.
Item 3.2, so CNAG disclaiming of the Department for Economy accounts for 23-24. And just to highlight members that the CNAG has disclaimed the 23-24 accounts of the Department for the Economy, and the committee team are just providing members with a hard copy of the BBC report on this opinion. And just to declare my own interest, I also sit on the Public Accounts Committee, and the PAC will have primacy on getting a briefing from the CNAG this week on it, but I think it's really important to have it on the agenda of this particular committee. So in case anybody missed it, the Department for Economy Accounts has consolidated, received a disclaimed audit opinion, and this is extremely unusual. It's really, really serious, and as Department of Finance, as the central oversight body of others on their accounts, I think that we would need to take a close look at this in terms of the opinions. Just from my own background on it, we would expect that for all of our departments, the CNAG should be able to provide a true and fair view, and would like to see an unqualified opinion on all accounts. The next stage of her opinion, she can highlight a matter, or she can provide a qualified opinion on things like fraud or irregularity. But she's actually disclaimed her audit opinions, she's distanced herself, and has a number of issues. And although PAC has primacy, the audit report is out there in the public domain, with a number of adjustments made to the accounts totalling some £1 billion, and I think the net effect was £323 million. So they're big numbers, there's a lot of issues here, and this is very, very significant. So again, just noting that PAC has primacy on it, but I think that as the Finance Committee, we need to be keeping a close eye on this, understand when the Department of Finance became aware of it, and what concerns we have for the 24-25 opening balances. So, Stevie?
Yeah, just thanks very much indeed, Chair. So this raised real concerns. I mean, declaration of interest, I used to be a chief executive, and if somebody disclaimed my accounts, I would have been the chief executive for very long. It's a very serious issue, and the concerns I have are, when were people informed and when did they know? We've had regular reports from from the Department of Finance and officials, and every time we had budget discussions, everything was being identified, particularly around the issues with the student loan book and how the student loan book was being managed. But there was never any indication that there was, close on, as the Controller and Auditor General says, close on £1 billion. I mean, that's about a third of the Department of the Economy's budget. And I think there's I think the accounting and the financial aspects really what sits within the PAC. But actually, bearing in mind, when we look at the lessons identified from the RHI report and what we saw from the COVID inquiry, where a lot of the recommendations hadn't actually been taking place, but openness and transparency, there has been no openness and transparency about this. And we really need to know when people knew and why we weren't informed. Because if we look at all the conversations we've had, and everybody in this committee as we've gone through, and we've been trying to understand how the bulges and the various sort of flows have been going through, to all of a sudden, when we get to the end of the year, suddenly we were not in the situation we thought we were. Yet there's over, potentially £1 billion that was being not properly accounted for. I think there's real concerns that need to be raised. And maybe, I'm sorry that the chair of the Economy Committee is not here, but maybe it might be something we might do as a joint session along with the Economy Committee. So I think this is really serious. And just, the Controller and Auditor General, who we know very well, uses the words disclaims accounts. I think that should be ringing huge alarm bells all the way through the Northern Ireland Executive and beyond.
Well, thank you, and I think whenever Philip Brett joins us later, we're going to return to this. But you're absolutely right. If it was a private sector set of accounts that were disclaimed, there would be penalties, there would be fines, there would be directors potentially struck off. This is how serious and unusual this is. So I think that it's right that we keep it high on the agenda and get the answers that Steve's mentioned. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think once you get into a position where there are disclaimed accounts, I think this committee must sit up and take notice. And I think this shouts ad hoc committee with regards to the Economy Committee and ourselves on this sort of stuff. Insufficient accounting records and explanations being given for 19 corrections. A potential 10 million error in the Department Statement of Comprehensive Net Expenditure, and the issues around the challenges with regards to Northern Regional College. So I do think there's something that we need to dip into here for us to be doing our job appropriately and right. And I think we need to really take a deep dive into the accounts and the opinions of the Auditor General.
No, thank you. Absolutely, and as you say, 10 million error, and it's just important that we clarify: are these, accounting entries? Are they mopped up somewhere else, or how much real money has actually been forgone here? And this was the 23-24 accounts disclaimed, and we currently are sitting in March of 25. So actually, the opening balances for the 24-25 accounts for the Department of Economy cannot be stood over, and we're currently in this particular financial year, so there are huge questions. When do we next have the Department of Finance officials in on the accounts?
We have Joanne up on the 26th, so not next week's forum session, but the week after that, so essentially as early as we can.
Okay, well, could we seek an update, I think, for next week's meeting, given that PAC will be getting a briefing tomorrow, so we could get something in terms of Department of Finance? Yeah. That's grand. So we could seek a members' agreement to request clarification from the Department of Finance as to whether it was aware of this situation and at what point, as well as the view of the unusual step that the CNAG has taken, and to seek the Department's reassurance that this issue has been appropriately managed and will not impact on the block grant.
Agreed.
Great. Thank you. And just as we're looking at that, and we're talking about the different audit opinions and the accounts, I just asked the committee in terms of the different departmental finance directors, what would be the committee's view? I would be of a view that it would be interesting to get the feedback from Joanne as to how often the wider finance directors meet, and perhaps us as a committee maybe even speaking to the finance directors of all the different committees, given that we're talking about the finance and the reporting of them.
Agreed.
Would you be in
Good
agreement?
idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead and answer that.
Yeah, so we've got members' agreement.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's
thank
members
you.
agreed, thank you.
Yeah, agenda item 4, draft minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of March 2025. So if we could refer members to page 7 of the meeting pack and ask members, are they content that the minutes are a true reflection of the proceedings of the meeting held on the 5th of March 2025?
Members content, thank you.
Yeah.
We just PP it for
So agenda item 5, matters arising. So item 5.1, the Department of Finance final budget 25-26. If we could refer members to page 20 of the meeting pack. The Department of Finance has written to all departments to seek further information in order to inform the final budget 25-26 proposals. These will be brought to the Executive following the closure of the overarching Department of Finance consultation on the 13th of March, tomorrow. Departments have been informed that the Chancellor is due to make her spring statement on the 26th of March. However, further Barnett consequentials are not anticipated in advance of the final budget. The departments have been asked to advise of reduced requirements against their allocation for earmarked items and to identify any pressures on earmarked expenditure. They've been asked to provide costs for an additional 3% pay award above the planning assumption of progression plus 3%. They've been asked to update costings in respect of national insurance contributions and to submit any additional FTC requests, and departments are reminded to submit their equality assessments. Submissions are to be sent to the Department of Finance by the 13th of March. Jerry Carroll?
Chair, next item, please. Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was a bit previous there, Chair. Apologies.
Yeah, so if I could seek agreement of the committee that this commissioning note is copied to statutory committees and the audit committee for their information.
Thank you.
Great,
Yep.
Thank you. Item 5.2, returns from statutory committees, 25-26 budget, and I could refer the members to page 24 of the meeting pack. As members will recall, a round-robin exercise was commissioned by this committee to other statutory committees in relation to the level of briefing and scrutiny of the 25-26 draft budgets. Members have noted that there is no consistency in the level of briefing received by committees. Last week, members noted returns from infrastructure, economy, agriculture and environment and rural affairs and justice committees. At page 25 of the meeting pack, members can now see the return from the communities committee. Returns from the TEO, health and education committees remain outstanding. Last week, members agreed to publish these online when all have been received. And Jerry Carroll, you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on page 28, Chair, it states that there are additional funds for housing adaptations for DFC 14.5 million and 6 million for housing weren't allocated. So I think it'd be useful for members to be kept up to date with that. So whether that's an email or a request to the Communities Committee, I don't know, but happy to be updated on that. And also in the, I think it's the same page, maybe further down, it states about alternative funding models were requested. So, I mean, I don't know if that's gone into the reclassification of housing executive or something totally different. So a bit of clarity on that from my end would be useful. So happy to kind of be guided on how best to kind of request that.
Yeah, the clerk says we can ask for that through the
Chair,
committee's
we'll
clerk.
do a memo to the Communities Committee
Hello, thanks.
and ask for that.
Okay, thank you. Members are in agreement. I ask members to note that.
Yep.
Thank you. Item 5.3, Construction Employers Federation. Correspondence has been received from the Construction Employers Federation. We have been copied into the CEF's response to the draft Northern Ireland Executive Budget for 25-26. This can be found at page 31 of the meeting pack. CEF argue that the proposed funding allocated to NI Water is not enough to address the identified need to build homes and enable business growth. The CEF welcomes the RRI revised limit in the coming financial year, but is concerned about the lack of an agreed investment strategy. Detail is provided in respect of underfunded water and wastewater systems and on earmarked allocations. And finally, the CEF call for consultation on a draft multi-year budget as soon as practicable after the CSR in June. I could seek members' agreement that this response is published on the committee web pages and copied to the Infrastructure Committee for information.
Just Chair, with your indulgence, the Minister yesterday was quite clear that he didn't want to talk about anything about water, about any alternative methods of funding or whatever it happens to be. But the figures he was using don't match what the CEF's figures are using, because they seem to say there's about a 407 million potentially a 407 million shortfall. Maybe it just might be useful to ask where the minister gets his figures from the shortfall from Northern Ireland Water, and just in comparison with CEF, there might be some easy reason for it, but it does seem that the construction people seem to have a realistic figure on it. It might be worth just teasing that one out.
We can, we can
Yeah.
reference their response to the.
Just that it stands out and go, that's not what the minister said. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so members are agreed. We can publish this on the web pages and copy to Infrastructure Committee. Thank you. Item 5.4, the Committee for Agriculture NICS sickness absence. Refer members to page 36 of the meeting pack. The Agriculture Committee has written to the Department of Finance regarding NICS sickness absence and the health wellbeing strategy, and we've been copied into the correspondence as a matter of courtesy and can expect a response in due course. Again, I think this point comes back to the point we've been making in a number of previous committee meetings, that whilst it's a central shared service, the crossover between the Department of Finance's role and the individual departments. But at this point, are members content to note this?
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5.5 and 5.6, the Department of Business and Trade Transformation Plan. Refer members to page 40 of the meeting pack and page 3 of the tabled pack. We've received a response from the Right Honourable Jonathan Reynolds MP, Secretary of State for Business and Trade, regarding the Post Office Transformation Plan. He states that the Post Office Chair has set out a plan for the future of the company following a strategic review. The company will introduce a new consultative council to work with the Post Office on how the transformation plan is taken forward, to provide genuine challenge and make sure that the plans remain focused on the needs of postmasters. The transformation plan seeks to reduce central costs and to examine in detail other ways of delivering efficiencies which should enable real-term increases in postmaster pay. The Secretary of State indicates that the Post Office has been facing significant financial challenges in recent years, requiring public subsidy to maintain its nationwide network of branches and services. Government uplifted this subsidy by £37.5 million in December of last year to further support the network and the important services it provides across the country. The government will continue to work closely with the Post Office as they develop their transformation plan, and the Post Office is expected to fully engage and consult unions, postmasters and all interested parties as they develop their proposals. And we will have a briefing later in the meeting from the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, and members may wish to refer to this during the briefing. I seek the agreement of members that the reply is copied to Retail NI as they raise the transformation plan during their oral briefing with the committee on the 15th of January.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. And moving to the table pack. Items 5.7 is the Dallow readout extract of requests made following the 19th of February meeting. So refer members to page 5 of the table pack. The Dallow readout table provided in today's pack is the readout issued following our meeting on the 19th of February. Responses for the majority of which were received on the 11th of March, and as such not in time for issue with the main meeting pack, but members can now consider the responses which follow in items 5.8 to 5.17. And members should also note that responses in relation to Fujitsu, contracts and procurement board are still with the Minister and are to follow. So item 5.8, Dallow readout response on the Northern Ireland Executive Restoration Financial Package, including the fiscal framework. Refer members to page 9 of the table pack. The Department has provided a status update on the Budget Sustainability Plan, indicating that officials have been in regular communication with Treasury officials on the ongoing implementation of the plan. The Department has also provided detail on the current forecast of income generation, indicating there will be a total additional forecast income of £129.7 million. The latest ISNI is in draft form, and it is hoped that it will be published in the coming weeks. The Department also indicate that the remaining transformation funding is expected to be allocated to digital transformation proposals, and through a further call for transformation proposals expected in the spring and summer. It's also indicated that at the scheduled briefing on the interim fiscal framework on the 14th of May, officials will give a substantive briefing on this. However, the Department states that officials expect that Treasury will want to critically consider any evidence provided by Professor Holtham's review. Ask members to note at this update.
No.
Yeah, thank you. Item 5.9. Dallow readout response on national insurance costs. Refer members to page 11 of the table pack. The department has again provided confirmation that Barnett consequentials won't be confirmed until the main estimates in June, meaning that allocations will likely be considered in the June monitoring round, and the department state that it is for individual ministers to prioritise and manage their budgets to ensure that they live within their allocations. But just to highlight again at this point, the Minister had confirmed some £200 million of additional costs for the incoming year. The expected agreement from Treasury is 140. Still haven't had a firm commitment off that, so there's going to be a 60 million shortfall in this in our core departments and arm's length bodies, not to mention our GPs, our dentists, our vulnerable community sector and local councils who are all beyond that. So this remains extremely significant to our public services and to our businesses, but I think it's important we just keep it high on our agenda as we're looking into the 25-26 budget, but ask members to note the information. Thank you. Item 510, Dallow readout response, revised Department of Finance delegate limits. So refer members to page 12 of the tabled pack. The department has provided the previous delegated limits in DAO 821 and indicated the revisions are to reflect changes to managing public money Northern Ireland, as well as the level of construction inflation that has been experienced since the publication of DAO 821. Ask members to note the information. Thank you. Item 511, the Dallow readout response on land and property services, the trust statement on the rate levy accruals account, annual report and accounts 23-24. I refer members to page 30 of the tabled pack, and the department have provided reasons which prevent 100% collection of rates, indicating that aspiration of this is balanced with reality. Each year, the collection of the performance of previous rating years are analysed and used to inform the incoming year's target. In 23-24, a target was set and achieved, and this has been uplifted by 0.5% for 24-25. And the department highlight that there are synergies in the measurement and reporting of collection performance that LPS is working towards as a benchmark on rate collection. Early comparisons with overall local authority performance for 23-24 indicate LPS's performance exceeds the overall local authority performance in collection terms. According to DL, UH and C local authorities, they collected 5.3% more council tax and business rates than they did in 22-23, and in comparison LPS collected 11% more. And I just want to make the point here that we had asked previously in setting targets how LPS's target was set compared to how they set their targets elsewhere. This isn't really answering this in my opinion, and I would ask that we could ask that again, because if they increased on the previous year in the mainland by 5.3% and we're being reported in Northern Ireland is better by increasing by 11% on the previous year, I would like to know what the actual percent is. If they're already sitting significantly higher than us on that one, and again, as referred to in previous committee meetings, I don't see any harm in setting an aspirational target for rates collection of 100% for members of the public to have some confidence in the system. Thank you.
Just before we move on, so it seems to be when we've asked the question about comparison with collection for local authorities in England, they've given us their performance comparison more than their target comparison, which is not the question that we asked. So I think we need to just go back. And our point, if I can raise it now, just be while I'm talking, what worries me about this whole process, and I'm trying to get the page, page 9, back to page 9 where it gives us the printouts, the readouts and the charts of all the Dallow requests. I don't see it good enough when I see response received the 11th of March to be considered at the meeting on the 12th of March. That's given us one day. And I'm not saying there's any sort of common thread or target here or whatever, or tactic, but to receive on the 11th, which is the day before a committee meeting, I think what we need to do out of practice is actually put it onto our main pack for the following week. as long as it's not time pressured. Because it's not, I just don't see it good practice us only seeing it on our table pack. So if it was put on the main pack for the following week, I think we'd have more chance to scrutinise it.
We can do that.
Yeah.
We can do that.
No, that's absolutely fair point. And in the previous one, there was a lot of information on the guidance notes to go through. Just haven't got it late yesterday as well. So we've got further queries on that one too.
Yeah.
So that'll certainly keep on the pack, and we can. There's a few others. I think they were all the same as well.
Yeah.
Weren't they? Yeah, we'll roll them in. Thank you. Going to seek members' agreement to note this update with the actions agreed, and ask the department for specific targets for collection used by GB local authorities.
Great.
Thank you.
Item 512, Dallow readout response on the Civil Service Pay Award 2024. Refer members to page 32 of the tabled pack. The department has stated that the pay award will be confirmed when the NICS has heard back from all recognised unions as to the acceptance or rejection of the offer. The last is expected in mid-March. Set aside refers to funding being centrally in the draft budget. Ask members to note this information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 513, Dallow readout response on the Public Sector Transformation Board. I refer members to page 33 of the tabled pack. The department has set out the timeline of engagement and correspondence between the CST and the Minister in relation to the terms of reference of the interim Public Sector Transformation Board, the drawdown of funding and agreement of spending. The department also indicate that proposals may have been revised by departments as part of their stage 2 assessment processes. Ask members to note this information at this point, but as we're moving into the second call to this following the announcements in the previous week, we just would be keen to update in terms of timelines
further
of the
updates to come,
process
Chair.
and communication. Does everyone agree?
Chair, there was a query then about the agreed terms of reference and whether they were actually agreed or not, because we knew that they needed to sign off from the Secretary of State. Is there anywhere in this that
Yes.
Have we the timeline?
Chair,
for
we
that?
do. We have a date, 18th of February. The Minister met with SOS and discussed the terms of reference and agreed those. So that was the 18th of February.
And the decision
And
was
the
made on the
decision to-
20th of
yeah.
January.
Yeah. And then the CST confirmed UKG funding on the 26th of February. And that was all set down in the Minister's previous letter to us about what they were agreeing to. Then the Finance Minister makes his announcement on the 4th of March. Yeah.
Through the chair, have we seen the terms of reference? Did we ask for them?
We
did
have
ask
asked
for
for them.
I
Chair, let
can't
me check back, because there's been a lot of correspondence on this, so I'm going to need to check and make sure. I want to say no,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
but
don't
let
want. I
me
don't
check
want
back, because
don't wanna say any
feel we
definite, Chair.
should have, but
because
I'm not
I
sure.
may have missed it, but I would like to.
Yeah.
I
There's
would
been
like
a
to see the
huge
terms of
amount of
reference.
correspondence. I have a feeling we did.
I
We
recall
will check back.
maybe a draft terms of reference,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't remember it being agreed. And
Final one.
certainly, whenever the statement was in the chamber, it was the first time that I
Mm-hmm.
heard clarification that there was an agreed terms of reference. And I appreciate we've got the dates and things for it, but
We'll
we can-
check back on
we
that,
can
because
ask
I
for the
suspect
details.
anything we have would have been drafted.
Useful for us to see them.
it would be good to compare the draft
Yeah.
with the
Actual.
actual terms of reference.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, content to take that
Yep.
action? Yeah,
Yep.
thank you. Item 514, Dallow readout response on the SEUPB accounts. I refer members to page 34 of the tabled pack. The department has indicated that work on the 2024 SEUPB accounts has commenced. It's anticipated that completion of all audit work and laying of the 2024 accounts will be undertaken in the final quarter of 2025. So it's good to see some progress on that. But again, given the audit opinion on the Department of Economy referring to different year ends and things, I think for me certainly it heightens the importance of staying on top and up to date with our consolidated bodies in the accounts. So we'll keep an eye on
Yes.
that one. Thank you. Ask members to note at this point.
Agreed.
Item 515, Dallow readout response on the departmental equality impacts. I refer members to page 35 of the table pack. The department has indicated that departments provided an initial assessment of equality impacts of the draft budget 25-26, which was published as part of the documentation issued for consultation. However, as per the Commission letter considered under CP Business earlier in the meeting today, further returns in this regard are due on the 13th of March. I ask members to note this information.
Yep.
Thank you. Item 5.16, the DALA readout response on SL1, the valuation, telecommunications, natural gas and water amendment regulations. I refer members to page 36 of the tabled pack. The department has stated that LPS neither holds additional information in respect of nor has any role in the licensing of these operators, which is a matter for the Department for the Economy and Ofcom Northern Ireland. Information held by LPS is limited to that information required for rating and valuation, which will be retained in due course once the statutory rule is enacted. Everyone content on that? Yeah. And ask members to note this information. The SR has now been formally laid and will be on the meeting agenda for the 26th of March, subject to the ESR report being published. Item 5.17, the DALA readout response on the Department of Finance budget 25-26. Refer members to page 37 of the tabled pack. The department has stated that draft budget has allocated the department with a capital budget of £32.5 million, with forecasts currently around £57.8 million. Work is ongoing with business areas to refine the forecasts and identify projects that may be reprofiled for future years. There's also potential for slippage in capital projects, which would allow the department to start with an over-planning position, which would be considered normal practice with capital funding. It's anticipated that 5 properties will be listed in 25-26, the details of which are currently commercially sensitive. Last year's capital forecast and allocation was managed through revising forecasts, reprofiling, income from asset sales and project slippage. The department anticipates similar management for 25-26. With regards to the NOVA programme, the capital forecast is around £17 million, with £2.5 million of this relating to the rabbit stream in 25-26. The vote on account has been calculated at approximately 45% of the preceding year's total voted provision. This should be sufficient to ensure that the provision made for each service is not exhausted before the main estimates can be approved. There have been no issues raised by any department on this at this point of the process. The Department of Finance can make cash advances from the consolidated fund up to 2% of the authorised supply expenditure for the previous year. If any amounts remain unpaid at the year end, then while these amounts remain outstanding, the amount available to draw down will be reduced. Just a point on this one. We're referring to the capital budget of the department itself as 32.5 with forecasts around 57.8. I think as a committee and being our department, it's really important to understand the language around that. To me, forecast means we expect rather than we hope for. So it would be really good to get our heads around this is the budget, what we're hoping for, and given that we have the programme for government, it'd be good to be able to have a look at that and discuss, the prioritisation of the way this actually sits here. And as well, I'm not sure if we'll have it any later on, but the Northern Ireland Civil Service Office or Estate Strategy, there's update issued there last week, and we're talking about properties being listed, and there's a few interesting things coming up on the estate management. We scheduled nothing on that, or is that something we could?
We can do. We have the officials in about disposal of assets, and they should be able to give us live update on that.
Yeah, no, that would be great. And just refer members, maybe we could circulate that to the estate strategy. There's some good information on that in terms of the properties. Ask members to note at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so agenda item 6, subordinate legislation, SL1, the Public Service Pensions Revaluation Northern Ireland, or Revaluation Order Northern Ireland 2025. Refer members to page 42 of the meeting pack for the clerk's cover note and relevant correspondence from the department. The Department intends to bring forward a statutory rule to specify the change in the general level of prices or earnings used by career average revalued earnings, CARE, the acronym, public service.
Through the chair, I should make a declaration of interest because I am the chair of the Assembly's pension scheme. So I don't think there is any, but for the sake of keeping our privilege, standards and privileges correct, I just make a declaration of interest.
Thank you. So it's the career average revalued earnings public service pension schemes for the purpose of revaluing active members' pension benefits. The rule will be subject to negative resolution procedure. The full details of the proposed rule, consultation and impacts can be found at page 44 of the meeting pack. I ask members if they are content with the proposed SR to specify the change in the general level of prices or earnings used by career average revalued earnings public service pension schemes for the purpose of revaluing active members' pension benefits.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 7, the disposal of assets, and we have an oral briefing by the Department of Finance. Oh. No, I'm good, thank you, So I refer members to page 73 of the meeting pack for the briefing note from the department provided in advance of today's briefing, and also in the tabled pack. Members will see other relevant papers, including the DALO readout response provided following the committee meeting on the 15th of January at page 40 of the tabled pack, and correspondence to the clerk dated the 12th of December in response to the request for a more detailed audit trail for Netherley and Cookstown at page 42 of the tabled pack. And members should note the commercial in confidence marking on this document, the contents of which should not be referenced in public session. And the committee requested a specific oral briefing on the disposal of assets to cover general disposal issues and include briefing on the witness random selection process and offers under market value following consideration of the issues in relation to sales of Cookstown, SSO and Netherley House. So I welcome to the meeting Desi McDonald, CPD Director.
Sorry, Chair. Are we in closed session?
No. However,
Yeah,
there
just-
are restricted documents, as Chair has referred to, so
page
it can't be referred
42.
to in open session.
All right, okay.
Yeah, thank you. So welcome to the meeting Desi McDonald, CPD Director of Properties Division, Niall Hobbs, CPD Deputy Director of Properties Division, Angela McGrath, LPS Director of Valuation Services, and Ursula Mayers, LPS Central Advisory Unit. You're very welcome to be here, and thanks for coming to committee to give us a briefing on this, to get a bit more information. I would invite you to make some opening comments.
Okay, thank you first to the committee for the opportunity to come and speak with you today. You've already introduced us. I'm Desi McDonald. This is Angela McGrath, Ursula Myers and Niall Hobbs. Just generally, the committee is aware of the Civil Services Office Estate Strategy, which we provided to the committee in December 2024. The strategy is now, just for your information, published on the department's website. We plan to do a report of progress on the strategy up to the end of this month, which will be the end of the current financial year, and we'll produce that over the coming weeks, and we'll provide that to the committee prior to publication, and the publication is aimed for at the end of May, at which time obviously we'd be very happy to come back again and speak to the committee in more detail about the strategy and what's in that first review. The strategy includes a target to reduce the in-scope footprint of the estate by 40% by 2028. Now, to achieve that is going to require very significant asset management interventions, and that will include a number of projects to better share the space that we've got, a number of disposals, including taking advantage of lease exits, and all of that is referenced in the strategy. Now, as you say, the committee has previously been provided with written briefings on the disposal process and on 2 particular recent disposals, and that's the purpose that we have today. We've come here to follow up in oral session. And I'll just say, if we don't have any information to hand, we will provide the committee, obviously, with a written response. So I don't know how you prefer to progress from here. Do you want to ask us questions Do you want me to give a bit of background on each of the sales? We're in your hands.
Yeah, well, as much as you're comfortable doing in open session of the committee, yeah.
Right, well, Properties Division acts as the asset owner. We declared the first particular property that we're speaking about in Cookstown surplus in 2023. The process then is that we advise the Central Advisory Unit and LPS colleagues here, and the property enters what's known as the D1 process, and then this is an internal kind of process that allows people to make expressions of interest in the property that we're talking about, and it also allows third sector organisations to apply if they are supported by DTNI, who I believe were here a few weeks ago. That's Development Trusts NI. The property we were talking about, there were 2 completed questionnaires. Both of the questionnaires came from third sector organisations. Both of them met the objectives that we had set. Both agreed to pay the valuation as assessed by our colleagues in LPS on the property, and both could complete in a reasonable timescale. So that is basically what we were looking for in Properties Division. The issue for us was that as both had provided the necessary assurance to complete the transaction, we had no way to separate or distinguish between the 2 of them. We can't apply further criteria to separate them in the circumstances, and so the decision was either to provide both with an equal and fair opportunity to progress the sale, or to reject both and move just to open market transaction. We decided to randomise the process that would allow both the equal opportunity to move forward, and this was done through a witnessed coin toss. One person selected the call and another made it, and this was recorded and placed on the department's records. The transaction was completed as we had hoped it would be, and it was a community asset transfer to a third sector organisation, and it achieved the Red Book valuation for the property. So that's the background.
No, thank you, and it's good to see the assets managed. The DTNI were here, and just really appreciated the value to communities of those. Just in terms of the randomised, nature of that, just on the reading of it, and I was keen to get a bit more detail on it. Is that process adopted into your policies, or? No,
it's not adopted into policies as such. This is the only time in my experience that we've had to make a decision of this sort, where you have 2 that you couldn't actually separate, and that's why we did it. There is no hierarchy that we can use to select preferred bidders, as a general point, if it gives reassurance, there is a clear distinction and separation between the duties and responsibilities of the 2 organisations and between the individuals who are involved in the process. As I say, our option would have, if we hadn't come up with a way of selecting between the 2 of them, it would have actually halted this progression as a community asset transfer, and we would have had to go to the open market. But this is the internal process. This isn't it would be obviously different if we go to the open market.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and before progressing to that, you obviously had the valuation, at the appropriate sale value. And I just had one further question, not so much related to that particular one, but where market value is set, and you've went through the process to dispose of it, and you get the bids in. Is there a certain amount or percentage by which the offer would be considered too low to accept? So if you were to value it and it went for sale and the bids were substantially lower than that, and you've considered them all, is there a point at which would be too low and you would just hold the asset?
On the open market, obviously LPS will be involved in advance of property being placed on the open market, and will have provided an assessment of an estimate of the market value on the basis of the information that we have in front of us. But obviously the testing that on the open market is the ultimate test of what the market value, what the market is prepared to pay at that particular point in time. And there's a range of factors that will be involved in that, be the economy, who's interested in it, who the parties are. what will happen is whatever bids are received will be assessed as to whether or not they do represent a reasonable return in terms of what the estimated value is. If it's felt that by holding off for a period of time that the market may recover a little bit and there's an opportunity to achieve a higher price, potentially by holding back for a period of time and then remarketing again, then that's a decision that will be taken in conjunction with the asset owner. But it's very difficult to say from one that there's a standard outcome from something like that. It will be taken on a case-by-case basis, and in discussion with LPS as the professional valuation experts, advising the asset owner and the marketing agent who would be involved in it as well.
Is there any incorporation of social value into the consideration of that?
Of market value. Market value is assessed according to the professional standards that are
More when
outlined
it goes,
by the RICS.
When it goes back to the property owners, so say properties division then, so you've valued it in terms of LPS, the bids have came in and they're below that, would there be a process by which properties division would take kind of like a social value aspect, or is it just purely on the basis of the market sale?
Well, there's two separate processes potentially at play here. So there's the when a property is first declared surplus by a department or another public sector body, then the opportunity is given to other public sector bodies or third sector organisations to say that they would have a use, a need, an immediate need for it. That's what we call the internal process, the internal market. And the process is that an assessment of value will be placed on the property market value by Land and Property Services. That is provided upfront to all potential owners, so that there's no there's full transparency in terms of what the expectation is from the asset owner in terms of the timescales for the sale, and also the expectation of the value that would be achieved for the disposal. And in most cases, the disposal will take place at that market value. There are some types of sales where there is a requirement in the Stormont Act to achieve to achieve best price in all disposals. There are occasions when the Stormont Act can be set aside, and there can be a disposal at less than best. But those are very limited, and only in very limited circumstances can that take place.
Thank you, and I'll welcome the briefing on the update on the estate strategy up from the end of the financial year. Jerry Carroll.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, some difficulty here because I want to kind of raise some issues with the policy, but I'm not quite sure whether this is restricted or not. I mean, I can refer to some generalities, but I'll not mention organisations specifically, but I'm not sure whether I can do that or how that works.
We have, Chair, we have the specific restricted documents in the table pack that can't be referenced. If
Page 42 there,
42
Jerry,
of that
can't be referenced.
table pack, if there's any way, Chair, to ask questions around those, or
Any objection to going into close for the
we,
just to ask the
if
question? So
members
Jerry's
agree, if
doesn't
members
feel
want to agree to
constrained.
that, we can't
Well,
do it.
I mean, the only difficulty is, I mean, the policy, I think it's requires some public scrutiny, and I think there's problems with it, but I can't really do that in public session. So I'm in a bit of a difficulty. I mean, I suppose, yeah, I'll do my best. I mean, I do have a concern that, private organisations, for profit, I think that operate against the interest, not in tandem with the interests of the executive and executive departments, can get access to public buildings. That's probably the best way of trying to raise a concern about that without breaching the restrictive nature of this. So I think that's a major concern. I also have a question that
Sorry, Chair, could I just clarify? Are you suggesting that some of the organisations that have access through the D1 process, through DTNI, are not organisations? I'm just not clear.
Well, I'm talking about the private healthcare sector.
Right.
So, I mean, I can continue on with that point, but I don't know whether
No, that's just.
I'm able to, because
I'm not.
Jerry, excuse me, would members be in agreement to, if we temporarily go into closed session, to understand the nature of
I would
Yeah,
think.
the question?
I don't want us
Members
tripping over
agree?
ourselves. Yeah.
Members, if the committee's content, then we can just give us a second to set that up. I'm afraid we're going to have to ask our American colleague to leave, sadly.
She can come back.
She can come back after.
Yeah, come back.
We're good, Stephen.
Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The other question is, how would the strategy fit in with executive ministers? Because my understanding is at least one executive department has issued a email to staff, basically encouraging people back in the office, back into work, kind of post COVID. So I've heard anecdotally some reports of individuals going back in the offices and there not being enough desks and not being enough space. So I'm just questioning how the strategy works in tandem with at least one department issuing a call for people back into the office space, and whether that's being measured against this policy of SSL.
Okay. Our strategy and our design criteria are based on an average 50% occupancy across the estate. So that assumes that you will have two people to one desk. So it's a 50% design average. That would allow a certain number. Obviously, I take your point that a certain number of people would be able to come into the office on any particular given day. if I roll this back a few years, when we first started looking at this, first started developing the figures a number of years ago, the office estate usage levels were around about 60%. So in any one day, that meant that around 40% of the space that we had on our office estate was already vacant. Now, that wasn't easily usable because it was sort of little pockets here and there. So part of the strategy has been to consolidate that. And if it gives you any reassurance, we have had very in-depth consultation with our Central Trade Union side, and they are content with the office estate strategy. They don't have any issues with it. So hopefully that will help. But as I say, it's a design average of 50%, but we do take into account that some organisations will need maybe 100% of people in, some organisations won't need that, and we work through that in consultation. So all of our sort of accommodation projects are worked through in consultation with the user. But as I say, we keep in close consultation with C2US all the way through on this issue.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thanks for that detail. It's useful, but I just I think there's maybe more of a joint up approach needed, maybe between DFC and yourselves, because if they're kind of the minister rather pushing people back in the office, and there's plans to kind of get rid of assets, then that doesn't sort of match up to me. But I'll look at that in a bit more detail, Desi. But I appreciate that information. Thank you.
Chair, there is a review of the hybrid working policy that's going on, and that'll be expected to deliver. I think, as the committee is aware, that'll be in due course. And again, that will be through consultation with TUS as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I put a couple of questions in myself in and around that, and appreciate that at the current time you have to take an average. Every department is doing something different, and it's not the same everywhere in the nature of everyone's job. I think we appreciate that. Paul Frew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your information. I'm actually intrigued by the whole random selection process. That sounds quite official. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not questioning it, because it is. It produces the random without bias. But I suspect it's something that you wouldn't want to be doing on a regular basis. So after the event, with all said and done and everything checked and balanced and recorded, and it being unbiased and it being random, have you considered how you could prevent such a course of action in the future?
You take it?
My view, in the particular circumstance, this is the only time this has happened. The first thing I would say is that both of the organisations were sponsored by the same sponsor. So the first thing might be into the future, not as part of what we do, but as part of any future review. Should a sponsor be able to sponsor more than one? Maybe they could take that choice. For us, the decision here was basically a binary one. It was either going to go to one of these two community organisations, or we were going to have to go to the open market. I can't think of another way other than having some sort of hierarchy of the of third sector organisations or community groups or whatever that would allow us to work through that. We're in the sort of managing the asset and trying to work through, and with due regard obviously to all the other issues that are going on and all of the priorities that the executive has, and we're keen to move obviously through to the end by getting the property to A, to somebody that wants it, and B, to bring the capital receipt in for government. So I don't think there's much more that we can do, but there may be other things that when reviews are carried out into processes that could be done that would help us. You're absolutely right. I didn't particularly want to have to do it this way, but the alternative decision would have been that the community asset transfer doesn't happen and it goes to the open market, which
I think it's so alien to the world that you guys have to operate in with regards to the heavily processed and policy-driven arena that you guys operate in on a daily basis. And of course, people would say policy is protection and everything else goes with it, but a practice that you could find anywhere else but, you know, civil service nearly. It is random. I'm not saying it's wrong. Yeah. I'm not questioning it at all. Yeah. I know that anyone involved in that thought process and the process would probably have had to think long and hard as to are we doing the right thing here. Yeah. And I suppose I admire your, what's the word? Courage, maybe, for taking that leap of randomised selection process and coming out the other side intact with a decision made. So it's so alien to the world that you live in.
I was going to say it's perhaps unique to Department of Finance that doesn't have any sort of, I suppose, particular ties to any sort of community type focus. Perhaps another department may have done it differently and evaluated it according to whether or not there was one or other that was more in line with their objectives and aims. That might have been there might have been a different means of making that random selection or making that selection by another department.
But even with that, then you're maybe adding. There's a danger of adding bias.
Exactly. So exactly.
Mm-hmm. So no, intriguing. Thank you.
No, thank you. I suppose the ultimate thing is, you know, you went in and valued. You said, you know, you're satisfied that value for money was achieved and market value was received by in terms of the money that changed hands for it. Through everyone, no one else has indicated. No, well, thank you very much for coming along and speaking to us on that, and we'll look forward to getting the update on the estate strategy and how it's gone for this financial year. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Can I just highlight the broadcasting? We think Deirdre may be in the waiting room, but we're not entirely sure. Yeah? It's whether broadcasting can see. We can't necessarily see the waiting room, so I'm just need to check with broadcasting. Deirdre's message there saying we didn't send her own link, did we?
Get access to the waiting room then, she doesn't have a link.
Possibly through Gemma's link. Chair, we need to send. We need to send Deirdre our own link. So we will get on to that now.
Do we need to work on that?
No, we're fine. We're still correct. We're okay.
Okay. So any follow-up action from that? I think we were just gonna. Are they scheduled already for that May briefing on the estate strategy? They had said that they'll advise us before it's published in May.
Yeah. We'll just receive that as an item of correspondence, and then we can schedule.
Get them in.
We'll schedule on the back
we
of
can
that.
schedule
Sure.
once we get it in. We have a definite date.
Yeah. No, thank you. Members content?
Content.
Yeah. Thank you.
And should we pause to let Deirdre?
Yeah. We'll just pause and see if we can get Deirdre Harvey
We're going to
connected
send her
here
our own link.
in broadcasting. Would I propose, members, that we adjourn for a brief comfort break until we get connection for Deirdre Hargay? You agree?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Just it'll take us a few minutes to get her email down to broadcast and then broadcast and get the email out to her.
We're off okay, yeah. I think Deirdre tried to get in through Gemma's link, and that doesn't work. Sure, it doesn't? No. In the old days with Starleaf, it was different, but this is more precise.
Are we still broadcasting, Steve?
No, we're okay. We're off now. We're paused. We are paused, aren't we, Stephen? We need to pause, Stephen. Can we? Stephen, there we go.
Got us back
There we
on?
go. We're technically
And
okay.
we're back in live session, and welcome Deirdre Harvey to the meeting online. Moving on to agenda item 8, building regulations. We have a written briefing by the Department of Finance. So I want to highlight to members that the committee noted in September 2024 that Department for Infrastructure, Department for Communities and Department for Finance and Department for the Economy Permanent Secretaries met on the 15th of May 2024 to discuss the optimum location for building regulations and standards following the publication of the Building Safety Experts Panel's report, Improving Safety in High-Rise Residential Buildings in Northern Ireland. And at that meeting, the Permanent Secretaries agreed that a task and finish group would be established and that this group would prepare a paper for agreement by the 4 Permanent Secretaries prior to submitting the options to ministers. This paper would focus on the model of delivery for building regulations and standards, setting out options, including a new Office of Building Safety. The paper was to be completed by the end of January 2025, and this committee requested an update of a written briefing on the outcome and decisions following ministerial consideration. Following discussion with the DALO, the team were informed that the task and finish group had completed its work and a paper was with the relevant ministers for consideration. A written briefing was to be submitted for consideration at today's meeting. The DALO did indicate that a further update would be provided when ministers have had an opportunity to consider the paper. No indicative timescale was given for this. However, a detailed paper arrived this morning from the department, which included a background paper, Grenfell Tower Inquiry Phase 1 and 2 recommendations and expert panel recommendations. This will be included in the meeting pack for the 26th of March. The level of briefing and material may warrant an oral briefing at this time. Seek members' agreement to schedule an oral briefing if members believe it would be necessary. I think there's good detail on it, and to the point Paul Free made earlier on, when we're getting the papers later, it's important that it goes into the following pack. So
We'll do that, Chair. Thank you.
thank you. Moving to agenda item 9, the Northern Ireland Banking and Financial Services Landscape Inquiry, and today we're getting an oral briefing from the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters. Can I seek members' agreement that Hansard should report this oral briefing?
Yes, please.
Great, Chair.
Thank you. Refer members to page 78 of the meeting pack for a clerk's cover note and page 81 of the meeting pack for relevant written submission. Also provided at page 85 of the meeting pack is the Hansard transcript of the oral briefing session with the Rural Community Network, which took place on 25th of February. I seek agreement from members that the written submission and Hansard transcript are published on the committee's web pages for inclusion in the committee's inquiry report.
Yep, great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to take the opportunity to welcome to the meeting Jim McCafferty, a non-executive director for Northern Ireland of the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters. We're delighted to have you here as part of our inquiry, and just want to hand over to you to make some opening
Yeah, by all
comments.
means, by all
Thank
means.
you.
Yeah, as you say, my name is Jim McCafferty. I'm the first and foremost a sub-postmaster. I manage the sub-postmaster of the Kennedy Centre in Belfast, but in my role on the Federation, I represent Northern Ireland sub-postmasters on the national board of the Federation. Our role, as I've said on the submission, is to support and sort of guide and assist every sub-postmaster that we can with contractual issues, with process issues, training, and well, basically whatever support that they need, we're there for them. I'm just back from board. We engage, and during part of that board meeting is with the Post Office and the senior people, the Chief Executive and the Chair and so on of the Post Office board themselves, and we challenge them on just about every level to make sure that they're doing the things right on behalf of the sub-postmasters, the whole network. But my specific role, if you like, is keeping the postmasters in Northern Ireland in full view as well, because there's a lot of services that they have in GB that we don't have in Northern Ireland, so we have to keep on bringing that up. By way of introduction, I'll leave it at that and maybe take it from there, if that's okay.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Just wondered if you could give us your assessment of the current status of the Post Office network in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I think the figure was mentioned on a previous submission of 441. It was a figure we gave to someone from Retail NI. It's a fluid figure, and there was some figures left off it, what they call outreach post offices, and also this new thing coming in called drop and collect, which I'll explain more about in a moment. So the figure's closer to 480 if you class outreaches as a fully fledged post office, which basically, if you're not sure what they are, they would work for
4 to 6 hours in a given week in various rural communities, but there's a host store that manages those, and they're not fully fledged post offices, but they provide a service, and that's hence the name Outreach for the rural sort of communities in Northern Ireland. So the figure is about, because it's fluid, is about 480 in Northern Ireland. Okay. The question on what they call directly managed offices, there's only a few in Northern Ireland, but the 111, I think, was mentioned in the press a while back. They're hoping to transition them rather than close them down, is what the Post Office will tell you. They won't be able to transition every one of them, but that's what they're planning to do for the ones like some Belfast and so on, but they're just a costly exercise and always have been. So as part of their central cost reduction, that's why they're trying to transition those, in other words, offload them to another operator, be that what they call a strategic partner or an individual, that's whoever's willing to take it. Post offices in Northern Ireland, like the whole network, is under a lot of pressure with survival. In real terms, in the last decade, the income has fallen. In 2015, the figure, I believe, was around about 574 million income paid to sub-postmasters throughout the whole network. By 2023 and 24, going into 24, it was down to something like 326. So it had actually fallen in real terms and actual terms, whatever you want to call it, because government services primarily were removed, be that post office card account, national savings and investments, various bill payments like HMRC and so on, all taken away. 10 years ago, the Post Office promised that they would increase government services, not reduce them, and that was this is subject of potentially another scandal, if you like. It's being looked at by Hyanc, who were on the Horizon scandal on a public inquiry as well. So they're gathering hundreds of applicants as we speak. So the Post Office do have, are guilty of a lot of things, but the government services were removed by government, as I say, throughout that whole time, and that's why they're in the state. Now it has increased for a number of reasons this past year or so to, I think it's 407 million in the last accounts, but it's still a far cry from what it was 10 years ago. You're probably aware of the new chair coming into the Post Office, Nigel Railton, who's announced 250 million to the network by 2030, 120 in this financial year, and they've already paid 20 at Christmas. But they're struggling to get the rest of it underwritten by government due to the spending review not having actually approved it yet. They're optimistic and so on that the residual 100 million will be paid from April to the end of March next year. But they've only promised they're guaranteed 17 million for April and May of this year, and that's always the only guarantee at the minute. The network as a whole, I'll speaking anecdotally for a second, as a non-executive director, I would be contacted by sub-postmasters in Northern Ireland who have a problem with me. In this case I'm talking about is selling your post office. In the past 2 weeks, it's a wee bit unusual, but 4 have contacted me saying that they're looking to sell their post office. It actually is quite difficult. It's not a saleable asset at the minute. We're hoping by 2030, if people can hang on for a length of time, or even the next few years, that because they're pumping this extra money in, that it'll become a valuable asset again. But it's not a saleable asset at the minute. If anything, people are walking away, throwing the keys up in the air and walking away, and not getting anything for return for their investment. That's the same across the whole network, not just exclusive to Northern Ireland. But yes, post offices do play a major role when we come to banking and for cash services. If you like, as I mentioned, it's 480. It's quite a sizable network in comparison to the other sort of players, the banks, the credit unions, and the ATMs for that matter. And we're still the number one sort of one to deal with cash services. I think I put a figure down on submission of 3 points. Let me just get the figure to be exact for you here. In January, that was the last figures the Post Office supplied to us. It was around about 3.7 billion, I think, throughout the networks, which has grown by 10% year on year. And that can be sort of translated to be more than 10% because Northern Ireland does have a heavy cash usage compared to the rest of the UK, as you know. So it's probably more than 10% year on year for our region, if you like. So what I'm saying is, of the provision of cash services, the post office does play the number one role, and with the 80 credit unions and the banks down to about approximately 100 now, with more to go this year. That the role will grow bigger and bigger, if you like. So we need to make sure the post office are protected and supported by not just government, but by local government like Stormont, basically, and the Assembly here as well. We are asking sort of primarily for new services. We're looking for the rates to be looked at, because at the minute you're probably aware of the rates sort of concession on 9, 12 and 15,000 sort of NAV for the smaller, which only affects the smaller offices. We don't know what way it's going to go in the next financial year, whether that's going to continue, or what we'd really like to see is an expansion of it, not a reduction of it or elimination of it, if you know what I mean. So if we can ask and we can petition, as we have done with the LPS already, can we look at the post office network as a whole and see the social value and the cash sort of inclusion value, because we do deal with the whole community, including the vulnerable and the aged, of course. That is a valuable asset, and there are offices going to close without support, whether that's by way of services from local government, or whether by way of concession through maybe perhaps rates concessions, that type of thing. I know that the planning and the spending review here is more or less finished, but it wasn't very clear what they're going to do specifically with post offices, so we're still shouting about that, if you like. I think we had a number of meetings with Andrew McAvoy from LPS, and we had at the round table, I'd mentioned it to Keith Archibald before she moved on to the economy, that we'd need to have further, and she was quite sort of keen at that time, but they didn't know she was going, so we'll follow it up with Mr. O'Dowd, and we'll try and keep the pressure on that way. But we'd feel that there is good reasoning and to extend the actual sort of concession that they have in rates right across the whole spectrum, percentage-wise, on a sliding scale, if you like, for the rest of the network in Northern Ireland.
Thank you. Could I just go back and
Yep.
you had mentioned a number of people had been in touch, thinking about walking
Yeah.
away from their post offices. And whenever you say it's not a saleable asset, so are these people who own it themselves?
It's
or?
a postmasters, yep.
Okay.
Well, one case, Coleraine direction, actually, someone contacted me recently, said they had their post office sold, not for a huge amount, but sold along with their cafe, which was all part of the going concern. And after they looked at the figures and considered the post office, and they actually looked more detail at the scandals, what they said, they decided they would take the cafe, not the post office. And that's kind of replicated in the rest of GB, if you like, but that's also replicated here as well. I do get calls about, what is the value of a post office when you look at the actual remuneration. If it's going down, you just begin to wonder. And because the 250 million that's been sort of mooted hasn't been guaranteed by any stretch, it's still a worry. Only 17 has been guaranteed this year, from the 1st of April to the end of March next year.
So I was going to ask you around the proposals under the new chair, and so the expectation is there's going to be a published green paper in response to his proposals in June 2025.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're expecting the clarity then
Yes.
on how much money will
We've
come
had
your way?
meetings and made submissions, initial submissions, should I say, to government on the green paper.
Yeah.
And because they haven't given any commitment, it was a 5-year plan submitted by the post office, and the government and the DBT have reduced that to a 1-year plan at a time with a view for 5 years. So that's been diluted already, which is a worry. They wouldn't accept the 5-year plan even from the post office. So that's something that we'll be talking about on the submission with our thoughts on the green paper itself. There's also the question of what's going to happen. What is the post office future? And there's a lot of discussion around mutualisation, but there is no clear sort of view of that at the minute. The reason being, how's this going to be funded? It's not a network that sort of runs with any kind of profitability. Post office are something like nearly 800 million in debt themselves. So if there was a mutual introduced tomorrow, it would collapse the next day, basically, because there's just it just wouldn't work. So they have to get to a stage of sort of that is profitable, and how they're going to do that. The digital first sort of policy by government has been quite damaging. Every department has been cut back, and they want to go digital, and they've withdrawn all these services in post office, but it's cheaper for them to have customers go online and so on, and that means we're not getting that business. Just on the point of that, in GB they have a driving licence application service. We don't have that here. We can give, well, I'll come back to this. Well, we can give a form out, and that's pretty much it. But we don't actually help the customer complete it. We don't submit it. We don't deal with the application as they do in England or Scotland and Wales. So the rest of the GB, as I say. So why is that? You know, why is DVA different than DVLA? You know, so it's not something that's been mentioned time and time again. And we have a number of MPs writing to DVA here, and they were given short shrift and said, no, we're not doing it, just forget about it, with no real explanation other than that's what we're doing. Having said that, they want to go digital across the whole country, so it doesn't bode well for services from government for the future, because that would want to be the main ones in GB, if you like.
Thank you. And I think, you know, across the board, whenever we see a lot of things moving to digitisation, you know, it definitely creates a hierarchy of access, and a lot of the time it's the more vulnerable in society that aren't able to access their services. And in terms of our inquiry, where we're looking specifically at, you know, people's access to their banking, you know, and their business and their monies in Northern Ireland, would there be anything very specific to Northern Ireland?
Well, we've asked for those services, banking services, to be expanded. I mean, we get people coming in, they want more from their banking, not just cash withdrawals, deposits. What about mini statements, for example, things like that? Maybe submitting applications for a current account through the post office, maybe savings accounts. These are all things that have been mentioned time and time again. That hasn't happened yet. It may happen with the green paper, because the government can sort of give directives as to do through the FCA and everything else. So yeah, there's scope there to do something. Whether they have the will to do it, you know, that's another matter, of course. ID digital services, quite a big thing that they haven't quite extended properly yet, but that's quite a thing in certain areas of GB, not so much here. Not too many post offices call it a big thing for them at all, you know, so that could be expanded for other different applications and maybe for benefits, that sort of thing. There's so much more you could do through government, which is where the most of the money, is not, as well as big business, could come from.
Thank you. I'll just bring in members. Jerry Carroll.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jim. Jim's obviously my constituency, so thanks for that work as well, Jim.
Oh, thanks,
Jim, just an open question, a few shorter ones. I mean, obviously we've had a bit of back and forth in this committee about questions about Fujitsu. Some members think it's we shouldn't be questioning. They're kind of awarding of government contracts. I think there's big questions, obviously, with the Horizon scandal. I mean, how confident would you and your organisation be about Fujitsu maybe getting government contracts?
Well, given government contracts in general, you mean, Jerry? Yeah.
Yeah, in general, yeah.
Well, no.
Sorry, Jim. Just if we could try to just keep it to the inquiry here on the banking services, maybe just Jerry, do you want to? Is there any way you could make it a wee bit? Just asking specifically here, Jim's in to talk on, you know, our inquiry on the banking services and the specifically in terms of the Federation of Sub Postmasters here.
It was mentioned in the briefing pack, Chair, wasn't it, Horizon? So I think it's a valid question.
Well, very briefly on Fujitsu. I mean, obviously they were subject to quite a bit on the inquiry about their role, basically, with the post office, and it's all well documented in the inquiry itself that they had failings too, and then they sort of denied back office access and so on and so forth. As you say, it's not strictly a banking question and so on, but they're stuck with the Horizon system until it's gradually changed. So hopefully, you know, for banking services as well, because it will affect banking services, to have a new system in place that will maybe allow, you know, more banking services than we already have.
Thanks, Jim. Just a couple of quick questions. I mean, generally, I mean, have you had any issues over the years with people trying to get their benefits through post offices, particularly around the sort of bank and public holiday period? I just got a query recently from a constituent. They're unsure about what their dates would be, but I'm assuming that's all quite smooth. But is there any issues around people getting their payments sort of that times of year, or things?
Well,
from your end?
Well, in many days gone by, people had the post office card account. Now they all have pretty much bank cards, apart from a few exceptions. So they can lift their money anytime they want, rather than waiting for the day or the week before, as it used to be, for getting their money in advance of a bank holiday. So a lot of people sort of manage their money. That seem to manage it a bit better when it's, the money's in their account, week in, week out, whatever benefits are getting in. So they lift it when they want. So there's not this big glut. It used to be you were slaughtered the day before or a week before a bank holiday, and now it's sort of very you wouldn't barely notice there's a bank holiday coming up. So it's not a big issue in itself. But there's been never any sort of problem. People's money's generally going in. They haven't said to us. The odd time people say there should have been money in it. The odd time, and it's usually resolved quite quickly when you make a phone call.
It's pretty smooth running then. That sounds positive. Yeah. And just two other quick questions. I know you mentioned obviously about the disparity between sort of passport driving license applications compared to Britain. Do you? Because we get a lot of constituents who obviously would go to the post office to post off passports and the like. Do you record that information about sort of passport queries?
Well, we deal with both, with the Irish passport, the British passport at the post office counter. Yeah, most people do it online now, so post office has lost quite a bit there. And that was, I mean, for example, we used to do 600 a month, January, February, and March. Now we do 50 because people go online. So the best we can get out of that in offices like ours is maybe do their photograph or something like that. But it's not the actual service that was there. It was pretty much a removal from a government service as well.
And trying to clarify, that was 600 a month across all sort of post offices?
No, specific to my office, but it's indicative of what was being done in other offices across the region, yeah.
But those figures are collected. Could we get the passport applications?
Oh yeah, by all means. Yep, I get that for you, certainly. Yep.
Thank you.
Figures,
just finally, just a quick question, finally, Chair. I think you sort of alluded to it in terms of in a rural context, and it's maybe more apt rurally, but also urban enterprise in terms of like your role to reduce social isolation and social exclusion. Could you maybe talk about the importance of sort of the post office for that, for people to interact with with staff and people? And they don't, cause I don't think that's talked about enough from your end. That's what you think.
Well, no, there is a big social sort of value of the post office. People don't just come in, and it's just purely transactional. They come in and they'll withdraw their money, deposit their money, and maybe pay a bill, that type of thing. But they're also coming in for a wee chat or a visit. And you can tell a lot of people come in, especially older and vulnerable people, and they want to spend a minute or two at the counter talking about, their ailments, their weather, whatever it may be. And generally speaking, most sub-postmasters know most of their customers by name, and maybe keep a wee eye on them. And sometimes they would come in, maybe have a bruise that had fall that day or something like that, or the previous day. I'm just thinking just this morning, because that happened quite a bit, that you are involved with the customers coming in. You know them by name, and they know your name and so on, and they enjoy the visit. Particularly in rural offices, it's been shown that's even more important because they're more isolated, literally, physically more isolated, and that there is a massive social aspect in every post office.
Thanks, Jim. Really important. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Steve Aiken.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed, Jim. Thanks very much indeed for your evidence. Look, just a couple of ones. First one, speaking as a local MLA, the number of times I had conversations with the banks saying, "Oh, we're shutting down the banks, but it's not going to be an issue because they can do the banking facility through the post office." And then the next day, getting some notification that one of the post offices in South Antrim's closing, or they're handing in their thing. It becomes really, really frustrating, and I really understand the difficulties. But if it's not a saleable asset. Is the only reason a lot of these places are staying open is because they can't get rid of them?
It's partly, yes. To be put it bluntly, there's a lot of people sort of sub-postmaster wise feel a commitment to the community, and they actually have that. And
most of them,
quite a lot of them run their business to the point where they're in debt, and then they'll say, look, they can't go on any further. Don't get me wrong, there are offices, they're not all unsaleable. It's difficult for an awful lot sort of to make a living out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we got the figure on there, but 70% receive less than the national minimum wage throughout the whole of the network. Yeah. That's an accepted figure by post office and government, by the way.
Yeah, because we're doing a sort of the whole idea of the sort of the banking inquiry, but you continuously get from the banks, where we're doing much more digitally online, but the overspill or whatever it is can be dealt with by the post office network.
Oh, they use that, yes.
And there doesn't seem to be any connect between sort of joined up thinking between the future of the post office network and also with the sort of the banking system. And I think that's one of the
Yeah.
really concern.
Yeah,
one of the
that's
big
an issue. I
concerns
mean,
have.
even locally, I mean, regionally, if you like, when the banks closes, there's meant to be engagement with the local post offices, and it just didn't happen, or it hasn't happened. Hasn't some occasions, because we've heard some good stories, but sometimes the bank just closed and the post office just found out about it. So there's not that cohesion there. There's not that sort of communication sometimes. You know, the banks are just going to do their own thing and have done their own thing, without so much as consultation with the local post office. But but yet they say go to the local post office, but they haven't even contacted the sub-postmaster.
No,
That's happened quite a few times.
I get that.
Yeah.
We had an incident of that in Crumlin quite recently. Or
Yeah.
not. So it was unbelievable. Bank
Yeah.
shuts. Oh, you can go to the post office. It's just gone.
Well, no,
Left hand is his right hand.
no, that shouldn't be the case.
In your document and your brief, and thank you very much indeed for it, you talk about this awareness session. I would particularly want to have that awareness session of bringing all the stakeholders together, because I don't feel that there is any joined up thinking about this, and it's it's the social value of the post office network added into the fact of we are more of a cash economy than other areas as well.
We are, yeah.
Added into the fact that if we're going to be able to provide these services across sort of Northern Ireland to be able to deliver, we need to be more joined up.
Yeah.
So, from my perspective, I'll be fully supportive of coming together and sort of achieving some kind of task force or working group or something that is looking at the whole.
Yeah.
Banking and post offices, all part of the
Yeah,
same.
the cash inclusion
And
services, absolutely.
including government services.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
But I think the most remarkable thing you were saying was the fact that 10% increase in cash coming across over.
Yes, well, largely due to the bank closures, to be fair. But
What just shows that if it's going up, there's actually a market there. So
Yeah.
there must be some way of making it so you can actually get some value out of it.
Oh yeah, well no, there has to be. People have to make a living out of it at the end of the day, and that's what we're trying to get to. Obviously, incidentally, when we got the invitation to the round table, the banking round table a while back there, we're very pleased. But as I sat there with a guy from Mark Gibson from the post office, and I think it was Chris Riley from Retail, and they were going down talking about credit unions and talking about banks and talking about ATMs and so on, and there was no mention of the post office. And well, don't get me wrong, we were there for that reason, but there was no mention as we didn't exist yet. We're the number one place for ordinary people, everyday people going about their business, their banking business. So it was pleased to be there and get that across at that point in time. Also, I think it was 2022 was the previous banking roundtable that was sort of convened, and the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters weren't invited to that. I don't even know if the post office were there. So I thought that was a bit odd, being the number one sort of choice for customers, if you like, for cash, for cash deposit, withdrawal, savings, you name it. But we weren't actually present or weren't invited. So it was good that we were invited the last time, is what I'm saying, and we'll hopefully be invited again and have that sort of awareness thing that you're talking about as well.
The final one, Jim, obviously, I hate saying this because you and I are probably of a similar age, but it's a bit of an aging workforce, and people are not going to take on sub-postmasters roles if they, from everything they've heard from the Horizon Project and all the rest of it, it's not an attractive place to go in, is it?
Right this moment in time, no. We are optimistic that the government will underwrite what they're suggesting in the Green Paper, what the Post Office have put forward for the 250 million. If that comes to fruition, which we hope it will, it'll hopefully turn around and make it a valuable, an aspirational asset again, which it hasn't been for a long time. Not for 10 years, I would say.
Thank you for the good work you do. Thanks, Al. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. And Gemma Dolan.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for coming in for your presentation. I have one question, and it might be a wee bit, might not be under your remit, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We've covered a lot about the bank closures and the impact it has on local areas, and obviously my area has also fallen victim to bank closures. And I commend the post offices for stepping up and filling the void in some cases. But obviously I represent a rural area, and it's a cross-border Fermanagh South Tyrone area. And people have issues with currency. Obviously they're getting paid in euro, but they're living in the north. And I'm just wondering, does the post office have any plans to kind of streamline this a wee bit better, for those who are trying to lodge money in the north, but it's euro? as I said, this might be completely out of your remit, but I just thought. when
Well,
you're
it
there-
is a wee bit, but I've heard this before. I mean, if someone comes in, maybe not from a board area, comes into Belfast or whatever, and they have euro, we basically just bat up and give them sterling, and then they can do whatever they want with the sterling. But you're losing a bit of value doing it that way. You're quite right. With euro accounts, no, it's never been brought up, not to me anyway. That's to be totally blunt about it, but yeah, it's something I'll keep a note of and mention it at meetings. You never know.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
That's me, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gemma. And Jim, just a final one. You had mentioned, being at the banking round table. I was just wondering,
Yeah.
have you any engagement with the cost of doing business survey that's going on currently?
Did complete a survey? Is that the survey was sent out and we've...
It's the one that it's been commissioned there through Kiva Archibald had, when she was previously minister, had commissioned this in terms of cost of doing business, taking account of the rates piece and the different pressures on businesses. And just because you had mentioned, the rates specific, I was wondering, were you engaged?
No, I
with
didn't see that.
survey?
We told that. So the last one there recently was the Consumer Council, which we're due to see as well.
It's just whenever you're sort of saying at the banking round table, the post offices were sort of forgotten about, and we're talking about rates review of businesses, and we wouldn't want to see the post offices being forgotten in that. We have this week the expansion of the the legislation that gives rates exemptions to rural ATMs, and like it's just
It wasn't specifically mentioned during the meeting. I approached her afterwards, and she explained to her that we met LPS, we met Andrew McAvoy and so on, and that would put us up a wee meeting, but then she'd gone. If you know what I mean, but she said that, yeah, that's fine, but we never got any further. No, I didn't complete a survey for that as such, no.
Yeah, no, just as you say, whenever, as Steve Aiken had said, the banks are referring to they're closing, but it's okay, you've got the post office, but, it's almost like the post office is
Well, they have used that as
a
crutch and a reason and so on, but then they haven't sort of involved the post office apart from just telling customers that in a way to close the door and run away sort of thing.
No, thank you very much, and thanks for your evidence today and taking the time to come up.
Oh,
We
not at all,
really
thank you.
appreciate it. It's very valuable to our inquiry. And
No, I
thanks
appreciate
for
the invitation,
good
thank
work
you.
that you do. Thanks very much, Jim.
Is that it?
Yep.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Cheers.
Passport application, see processes, but...
Okay, yeah. So a little bit of follow-up information just to liaise with Jim on after that, and and we're content. So moving on to agenda item 10, we have another session. It's the Northern Ireland Banking and Financial Services Landscape Inquiry, oral briefing from Malile and District Community Association, and they're going to be joining us via Zoom. Can I seek members' agreement that Hansard should report on this oral briefing? Thank you. If we could refer members to page 95 of the meeting pack for the clerk's cover note and page 61 of the tabled pack for the relevant written submission. Also provided at page 98 of the meeting pack is the final report of the community access to cash pilots, which will be referenced in the oral briefing. So yes, I've sought agreement of members that the written submission from Hansard transcript and community access to cash pilots are published on the committee's web pages for inclusion in the committee's report. Members are agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. There we go. So I would like to welcome to the meeting via Zoom Bill McGraw, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of Malile and District Community Association. Bill, you're very, very welcome here at the Northern Ireland Assembly Finance Committee today, and thanks for taking the time to give us evidence on this important inquiry. If we could hand over to you to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Very glad to be with you today. Just to give you a little bit of an outline, please stop me if I ramble on too long, but really just in terms of where Malile came from and where they came into the access to cash scheme. We're like many other, I'm sorry, I've got a dog barking at my side here, so bear with me. Very much like many other villages across the UK. We didn't have a bank to start with. We had trouble over the years in people making their way to Donaghadee. There'd be about 2.5 miles. Newtownards or Bangor would be the larger towns, obviously, at about 7.5 to 8.5 miles. There were two cash outlets in the village. Initially, there was a post office run by an employed sub postmaster, and there was an ATM in a small independent spar store halfway along the main street. That was really what all we had. There was some history of ATM access being free, but charging did creep in to the one in the independent spar store. We did have problems. Sometimes that ATM was empty. It wasn't refilled regularly. It just didn't work on occasion. Um, in the later years, then the ATM was becoming such an issue that we did speak to political representatives, and we tried to influence the installation of a second ATM somewhere in the village. We eventually did get one, but that was only after our original post office closed. And the post office services then were transferred up to a combined sort of convenience store with a post office counter. Now, that store was refurbished quite well, quite nicely, with, I believe, cash from the post office. And at that point, an ATM was installed there, so that service was quite good at that point. Unfortunately, well, we spoke to the Access to Cash project. We saw it advertised. We went along. We told them our story. We told them what we'd like to do in the community, which was very much around supporting people who have difficulty getting cash. We would have liked to find a way that we could give them cash out of we have a small charity shop housed within our community hub, and we wanted to find a way that we could give people cash on their card by way of cash advance, obviously, or cash back, I should say. So, and I hope I'm right in saying this, but the law, obviously, at that stage was that you had to actually buy something to be able to take advantage of cash advance. So it worked quite well because we had the small charity shop there. They could buy a lollipop or something like that for 10p, and they could get £10 out in cash quite easily. And that was a system that was very useful to us, especially given sort of the aftermath of COVID-19, where people were, in some cases, afraid, but certainly reluctant in many ways to travel further afield to get cash. So that certainly worked for us, and we were very grateful to the support we got from the Access to Cash scheme to do that. Developments in the village, as I say, the original post office closed. Unfortunately, in due course, the combined convenience store, which had taken over the post office, also closed. So that was, and indeed the local independent spar closed. So, our main street was looking pretty disastrous at that stage with empty shops, and some would say it still does. We then there was news that a new Eurospar was going to open in the village. We'd never had a petrol station before. We were one of the places where you needed petrol. You had to drive a bit further afield as well. So we never had a petrol station. Eurospar came along with this plan for a lovely new store just on the outskirts of the village, maybe a quarter of a mile, maybe half a mile at most from sort of the more populated areas. So this was news to us, and of course there was going to be an ATM there, and we very much welcomed that. Whenever we first saw the plans from Eurospar, we actually did speak to them in terms of a what if scenario, that if the post office franchise, for want of a better word, became available, would they be interested in taking it on? Now, obviously, they couldn't commit at that stage mainly because it wasn't available, it wasn't there to say yes to. But we got pretty good vibes from them that there was certainly space within the store that could be developed for a post office service. So eventually that came along. It's now located in the new Eurospar. It works very well. We hear very good reports about the staff, them being very helpful, very cooperative. Will work with people. I mean, some of the problems that you sometimes find going along to a post office, if if my wife's lodging £17 from her Monday morning fitness class, if it's not bagged and separated in bags, it becomes a problem to lodge it in some places. The staff near Spar are very helpful. They do things like that. A small post office may tend to do more than the larger sort of do it by the book. So really, we're very happy with the situation at the moment. We are aware that the banking hubs that are opening. I know there's one in Humber, as one, I think, in Kilkeel. There might even be one opening in Downpatrick. I'm not sure. Members of the committee will probably be more aware of that than I am. But certainly, we would see. We like the banking hubs because they're almost replicating what we hope to see in the first instance by providing almost a mini bank down at the bottom end of our community hub. And for all sorts of reasons, security, cash handling, volunteers rather than staff. The problems, well, maybe not insurmountable, but they certainly were significant. And it would have taken quite an investment in both people and resources to do that. So I suppose we would welcome a banking hub. It's never been formally discussed that I'm aware of in the village, but I mean, Donaghadee, the nearest small town still to us, could well be a location for a banking hub, even if Malaya wasn't, which would make things a little bit easier. I'm personally not exactly sure what a banking hub does. I mean, if you can do all the things that you can do in a traditional bank branch, then that's got to be a good thing. And I suppose to whatever extent it covers the need, then it's admirable. It's an asset to the location. Um, I suppose I did note just in some of the Facebook comments and things like that, and indeed in the finance minister's banking roundtable, one of the last meetings, there was some comment around post offices and providers of that type. It actually costing them money to provide cash, and of course it does. If we give cash back through our charity shop, it costs us 1.69% of whatever we give. We just call that's just a contribution to the community. It's part of our running cost, and we're not overly worried about it. But obviously, we're restricted by the amount of money we have in the till. We might have a couple of £100 at the end of a very good week, so we might be able to advance that sort of amount, but we have to keep then an amount for change and that sort of thing. So we're very much restricted on what cash we have. In the initial stages, we did say, well, why can we not draw some more cash and provide this as a community service? But then it gets into the more sort of, you're almost operating a mini bank. So I suppose just to note, I mean, we played with things. I mean, I have my SHRAP card. I still have it from an experiment that the guys did on the access to cash scheme. It was almost like a coin jar. So in many locations in the village, if you went in with your grubby fiver to spend, and it only cost £4.73, you could get the change put onto your SHRAP card, which meant that you weren't carrying as much loose change. Now it was a quirky sort of system. It worked, and it was a trial, I suppose, but it would only ever have been feasible if almost every shop in the village and every shop in Donaghadee where you would want to go and spend your loose change actually took the card. So it was one of those things, it was interesting, but probably in the real world not terribly useful. Um, so I'm not sure whether there's an awful lot I can add to the story. I'm more than happy to answer questions that you might have or elaborate on any of the points I've raised there.
Thank you very much, Bill. Really appreciate you giving the evidence, and I think to be commended yourself and your community association for taking proactive steps and to address the needs of your own community. And I think that's the resounding message here, especially in rural areas. I represent as a constituency MLA South Down, which is quite rural. So we had in Kilkeel, we had the first banking hub in Northern Ireland. I've actually got two others in the constituency, one in Newcastle and one in Warren Point. And I completely take your point as to, they're not ticking the box for everything that everybody expected them to be. But I think that a key learning out of them is that, we need to be engaging with the communities to see what the needs are in terms of the way that you have done this work yourself. And as a committee, we're going to be going out in a few weeks to have a tour of the Kilkeel Banking Hub and gathering, our own perspective and seeing that firsthand as a committee, which I think is really important. As you're saying, there is a little bit of a lack of understanding from everyone as to what they include, and I think the adaptability and engagement would be really, really important. And just wanted to ask, so in terms of so you as a community association just identified your issues, progressed them and worked forward. Do you think what do you think would be a good forum for localised areas, maybe particularly rural areas, as to when banks are closing and you're looking at these type of things? Who do you think was best placed to facilitate that? Do you think would it be a local council group, a local chamber of commerce, or groups like yourself?
It's a good question. And what we found, in Malaya, we would have like a steering group, which we try to bring all of the voluntary organisations, including churches, including sports clubs and so on, bring them together. So we already have like a steering group almost. It very much drives what we do, not so much in the community association, but we would also we wear a number of different hats. We also have Malaya Regeneration. Malaya Regeneration was specifically put together some years ago to try and drive the sort of bigger projects in the village that if you like, the community association. I mean, I'm no spring chicken. I hasten to add, but there are older people on the community association that maybe didn't want to take on the legal responsibility, if you like, of bigger projects. Now, to be truthful, we haven't managed to do very much as yet, but that's still sitting there in the background. And certainly our steering group of all the village organisations would feed into that in terms of trying to get things done. And obviously, we also work very closely with the council. There are other organisations. I mean, I'm vice chair of County Down and Rural Community Network that works very well in bringing community groups together. We have an Ards Peninsula Villages partnership that literally tries to cover the people on the peninsula. So we have various options where we can bring those sorts of things to the fore. And certainly it's very, very useful to bring it together in one place like that.
Yeah, definitely see, whenever you were just outlining how, you never had a bank in the first place. So I think a lot of the time whenever we're looking at this, we're looking at the impact of how banks are reaching people in Northern Ireland, the impact of closure of banks, but you actually didn't have one, in the first place, and just taking into account the rurality of Northern Ireland in this. I think that's just important, as you say, and the good work of the County Down Rural Community Network, that the voluntary community sector have a really important role here to play in terms of, consultation, wider piece and reaching those corners of Northern Ireland. But
Mhm. The other thing that I should have perhaps mentioned we did encourage was the setting up of a credit union, or sorry, the establishment of a branch of an existing credit union within the village. Now, to some extent, it's been a little bit disappointing because they only open a couple of hours one day a week. But that's very much down to, I suppose, supply and demand. You know, if there's a demand for more of their services, I think they'd probably be prepared to open more often. And certainly, although the Malile office is only open, I think 2 hours on a Friday or something, there's a Bangor office which opens, I believe, 4 days a week or maybe 6 hours a day or whatever, you know. And I think again, it's this challenge of how you provide some sort of banking service in the absence of banks, you know, and the credit unions maybe the credit unions seem to us to address maybe you know a desire that we would have had, as I say, to run almost like a mini bank in the back end of the community hub. It seemed that the credit unions were almost essentially there already to do that. So there was kind of no point in reinventing the wheel almost.
No, thanks very much. Steve Aiken?
No, that's all right, thanks.
Sorry.
Any other
No,
members?
Thank you. Any other members? Any questions for Bill? No? Well, thank you very much, Bill. It's very, very informative. And again, just to, you know, commend you on the good work that you've done for the people in the community of Malile in terms of, you know, reaching out and establishing their needs in terms of access to cash. Deirdre Hargey?
Yeah, no, sorry for coming in a bit late there. And Bill, thanks very much for your presentation. I think it's really heartening to see communities organise around these issues and users showing leadership on it. So I think it's really keen. As part of this inquiry, we hear the voices at the grassroots. And I suppose one of the issues I wanted to ask in terms of your organisation and the capacity and support that's needed, you know, in terms of some of the initial trial around the access to cash. I mean, you seem a pretty organised group, but were there capacity issues that if you were to do it again, you know, that you would put in place? And if so, what are they? And you also talk around, you know, the new kind of petrol station one-stop shop that opened there. I mean, if that was to go, or the viability of that, are there issues that you're picking up? And also when you're engaging through your own shop where you're trying to provide that support. I mean, I can see from some of the work that's being looked at in terms of access to cash at Westminster, there are certain sections of our population, you know, so older people, those from lower income backgrounds, those with disabilities, even the kind of rural spread as well. And obviously here in the north, we have more rural communities than even urban. So are you seeing those challenges in terms of access for cash at the local level? And have you seen any changes in trends in terms of people that are using your services? Sorry, that was probably a couple of things there, but just really keen to hear your perspective on them.
No, that's okay. Certainly in terms of capacity, like many voluntary organisations across the province, and I dare say across the entire islands, you know, we struggle for people. We struggle for succession planning. You know, those of us who've been involved for, oh, you know, maybe 20 years, we're not getting any younger. It can be very difficult to bring other people on, especially to areas of responsibility. So, I mean, again, even harking back to the possible establishment of something in the back end of the hub, you know, to start looking even at banking licenses, to start looking at increased security, start looking at volunteers handling cash. It just, you know, it would have been a nightmare, but essentially, I suspect maybe that's where it might have to go. I do share your comment. I mean, the petrol station and post office counter works very well. I do worry that someday, you know, it's not going to be viable for whatever reason, that, you know, the costs are too much, or they don't feel they're getting enough footfall. I mean, I think this is one of the issues that was highlighted within even the Comber banking hub, that the post office in Comber were obviously doing a very good job in their customers' eyes, and appreciated the footfall that gave them that extra business. But to my mind, they almost ended up advocating against the banking hub, which was effectively run by as I understand it, the post office, post office corporate level. So it looked very strange to me to almost be advocating against, and many of the clientele, obviously very happy clientele of the existing post office, were saying, yes, we love our post office, we're not going to go near that place. So that, to me, that's a huge dilemma in the setting up of the hubs, or indeed in the setting up of any alternative operation, be it what something we might do, something that a credit union might do if the law allowed them to do it. It's around customer perception, and it's around what customers want and feel are meeting their needs. You mentioned trains. No, I don't think there's any trends developing as such. We probably saw more usage of the cashback whenever COVID was more rife, and people were less happy about going out. I mean, I looked at the most recent statement we got. We had maybe somewhere between 3 to 6 transactions a day. They averaged between 150, which was obviously somebody just buying something in our charity shop, up to about £17, which it could have been someone buying half a dozen items in our charity shop, or one item plus £10 cash. I don't have that sort of breakdown with me, unfortunately. So I suppose the thought is that there's probably less use of cashback now, because the ATM at the Eurospar and the counter facility at the Eurospar seem to be working pretty well. But as I think your question sort of hinted at, what happens when that goes wrong?
No, that's great. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you, Deirdre. Anyone else? No? Thanks very much, Bill, and thanks again for joining us today. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to give evidence to our inquiry. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Very happy to have spoken to you.
Thank you.
So, are we any follow-up action for that one? No?
Nothing further on that one.
Thank you. Okay, so members, moving on to agenda item number 11 is correspondence. Item 11.1 is the 34th report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules. The Examiner has published her 34th report. There are no rules referenced with relevance to this committee, and this is provided for information only. I ask members to note this. Agenda item 12 is the draft forward work plan, and refer members to the pack. Is the table pack? Page number?
Dropped out, Chair.
Page 204 of the pack there. And ask the clerk to speak to that.
So, Chair, we have the Interparliamentary Finance Committee Forum next week. We're kicking off from about 9:30 with that, and I appreciate that will be in room 115. The reason for 115 is just physically this setup in the Senate wasn't going to work for us, and there's another event was going to be able to make use of the Senate, so we moved into 115. Members have seen the live agenda, and we will send that out again. That looks pretty much now pinned down. We're in communication with the Chief Secretary of the Treasury's Office. We have confirmation from the Minister, Sir Robert. Then there's a couple of additional items that will be discussed at the meeting, including jurisdictional updates, and also a kind of looking at some kind of legacy report from the forum. Members will appreciate that while this is the 4th meeting of the forum, the first few meetings were held during time the committee or the assembly was in hiatus.
During our interregnum.
So the input on that will be primarily from the Scottish and Welsh committees. Everyone is hopefully going to be fine for that early start. The other two committees are arriving the previous evening. They're staying locally at the Stormont, so they're very close by. We think we now, I'm going to touch wood as I say this, have all of our logistical issues pinned down. We've done runs for the link to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, so that should hopefully all go okay. So the other thing, Chair, I wanted to raise as well was seeking members' agreement to start early, 1 p.m. on the 26th of March. It has proved not particularly necessary today, but that's just the way things have fallen with building regs and so on. But we do have a really full agenda for the 26th, so if members are content, we would seek approval to do a 1 p.m. start. The other thing, Chair, I wanted to raise was obviously members know we have Kilkeel on the 2nd of April. I've had a message from Mr. Frew, and I'm assuming the same then for Ms. Dolan, that the Standards and Privileges Committee is not meeting that morning, so we should be clear.
So, just to be clear, I'd notified you about next week's.
Sorry, next week, that was the 19th, wasn't it?
Aye, so that was the 19th, which is the all-day type meeting, which meant I was able to go to that one.
Chair, what I meant was confirmation for the 2nd. Otherwise, I got overexcited with the Standards.
I think there is a CSP meeting on the Kilkeel day.
Okay.
There is, Chair. I got confirmation last week.
Okay.
Leave us.
Right. We're going to need to.
But, you know, they start at 10. They could be over by 11.
Dial into that one.
We looked at possibilities around the dial-in, but we don't have the live broadcast situation, so it's not going to work. But the way we're running Kilkeel, that should still allow you to get down there for the meeting itself. And if that's kind of doable, we should then still be okay in terms of quorum for the meeting. We won't have as many members for the visit to the banking hub, but we should be okay for quorum. And I think Mr. Tennyson also said he'd be able to attend. I think he confirmed that last week as well. So no, we should be right. We will keep in touch on that one.
Okay.
But we should be okay for the meeting. Should be okay for the meeting. But we will keep that live.
So yeah, keep it live, because there is still a facility for Standards and for a Standards Privilege Committee to do it hybrid. So
you could go down there
and be in Kilkeel and do it hybrid.
We could weave some magic like that.
Yeah.
You can use my office.
So there you go.
And the hotel will facilitate whatever they need to as well, because they've been very good so far. So we can look at that.
Yeah, so it's just been too far in the head in front for me to consider, for me to think about it.
2 weeks out.
Logistically, by then. But so we might be able to weave our magic, so because I know our presence will be felt. And
I think the whole of Kilkeel is very excited. Certainly on our site visit,
20 people.
The Gemma will be there.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll continue to tick-tack with members on that one, but that's kind of our aim, is to make sure we're correct for that. Then the other one is just to update. We've got responses in from the banks and building societies. Those are still coming, but they're largely sorted out for the 9th of April. Again, that's going to be logistically interesting, because we'll have 8 for the bank session. So our plan, and we've cleared this with broadcasting, is we'll have 4 as normal in witness spots, and then we'll have a further 2 in each of the second rows of the Senate chamber, because we can mic those up, which I think was done previously for concurrent meetings, so we've seen it in action. We know we can do that. So it will be unusual looking, but it will allow full camera coverage, and also microphones as well. So it'll just be a bit unusual looking. And those are all the things I wanted to update on, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you. So on the seek members' agreement for the forward work plan to be published on the committee web pages. Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 13, any other business. Just want to bring up again, we had referred at the start of the meeting, Philip, the Department for Economy accounts and the disclaimer opinion. And I think we've agreed as actions from here that the PAC obviously will be getting a briefing from the CNAG tomorrow on this. But in terms of Department of Finance, we're wanting to seek clarity on timings as to whenever people became aware of things and what this actually means for the block grant. But just in reference to the fact that it's Department of Economy and you were chair of it, I wondered if there's any sort of joint up approach.
We raised it today at Economy Committee. Our advice was that we can have the Permanent Secretary come to us once the PAC has discharged primacy over the issue. That was the official advice that we were given.
Okay.
We'll see, Chair, then what comes out of the PAC committee meeting. We focus on that, Chair, in the meantime.
That's grand. Any other members have any other business that they wish to discuss?
Sure.
No? Okay, thank you. So agenda item 14, our date, time and place of the next meeting. So obviously next week we've got our forum, and then following that our next committee meeting will be Wednesday the 26th of March at 1 p.m. in the Senate chamber. And I put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Close in early.
Stephen, do you even give them or seek them?